So having worked on some small jumps where we're looking at the technique of pumping into the lip, extending slightly in the air and pushing into the landing, we'll take things up a little level. Now visually this is a little bit more intimidating. Obviously the camera makes me look older, faster, and this jump look flat. But in reality I'm 21 and this is getting slightly larger. Penalty for failure is slightly higher, but it's still quite low. Again, psychological terms, it's easy to start tensing up as you get bigger and bigger jumps. If it's the biggest jump you've ever done and that's in your mind, you start to become all consumed about the size of the jump rather than thinking about the process of the jump itself. When you drive your car fast, you don't suddenly tense up and drive it in a very different way to when you're driving it at a medium speed. So think about that in terms of how you're driving the bike. Same principles apply. The bike needs to accelerate through the takeoff. We need to lighten up in the air, soften our arms and legs and push into the landing so to absorb the energy as we land. Any tightening up in the air, any freezing, holding of the breath and tensing up is going to result in numerous outcomes which are all fairly negative. If you tighten up as you hit the lip and go bolt rigid, you're going to get more height, but in the air, if you've already moved your weight back slightly, you're going to land on your back wheel. And if you've frozen in the air and have spotted your landing and are staring at it intently, you're going to rotate forward in the air. Just like all riding of trail, the bike is going to move around below you. As the bike goes up the lip, it's going to lean back slightly. As it drops into the landing, it's going to nose slightly. We need to allow that to happen without necessarily rotating our own mass to the same degree. So as Josh hits this jump, although the bike's going to go up and then nose slightly into the landing, you won't see Josh's body doing the same thing. That'll stay remarkably level in the air, and that's what we're trying to achieve. Letting the bike rotate below us and using the bike's rotation without our mass becoming the accelerating force, keeping the bike as the accelerating mass and driving it through the section. Now in effect this is a gap jump. There is a takeoff point and a landing point. But it's not very it doesn't penalise you particularly heavily if you land in the flat section. It will do if you're frozen and dead solid in the air, and frozen solid, you're going to land as one mass with the bike bang on top of it. But if you push through slightly and extend the bike and accelerate the bike into the landing, that force is going to be dissipated, you're going to feel less feedback from the bike and get a softer landing. So even if you come up a little bit short and land on the flat section before the downslope, it shouldn't be too punishing. Again, in terms of performance cues, we haven't given ourselves a big natural trail jump rather than a nice smoothed out sort of training area or bike park with a long run in, long run out. One of the keys is getting your entry speed right early on. You've got to carry some speed through that corner to carry. The less speed you're carrying into the section, the more harder you're going to have to pump, the more air you're going to have to gain through pumping and accelerating the bike through pumping than pure pedal power. So good cornering technique is kind of essential to getting this jump nailed. You'll see as Josh approaches that jump, he gives it a couple of little pumps, he keeps the bike moving nice and freely below him. And partly that's just loosening up, making sure he's staying fluid on the bike, rather than just rolling in, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes, getting tighter and tighter. So that little movement on the bike, generally letting the bike flow around below him a bit more, all helps in staying nice and relaxed in the air. The more time Josh has got in the air, the more time there is to freeze. So what a lot of riders like to do is put a little tweak in there, give themselves something to do, but not too much. Although we need to let the bike rotate slightly back, slightly forward through the course of the jump, we need to realise that there's no pressure below the wheels. So anything we put in is going to be exaggerated. It doesn't take much to start the bike rotating forward. It doesn't take too much to have it rotating too far backwards. Any pull up on the bars as your weight shifts up and back is going to cause a rear wheel landing, which isn't ideal. And any pull up on the bars, if you're central on the bike, is going to pull you slightly forward and bury the nose. So although we want to stay fluid and although we want the bike to rotate, we don't want any massive sudden inputs, just as we don't want to freeze solid either. So if we take it a little bit slower and don't carry the necessary speed that Josh has, or accelerate the bike through the lip and get as much pump off the lip as Josh did, we are going to land flat, possibly getting the front wheel to this point, but maybe landing the bike kind of flat here. Again, that's not ideal, but if we accelerate the bike into the landing and push through, that's not going to be disastrous, as I shall now demonstrate. So approaching with less speed and pushing through, As long as I make sure the bike accelerates more onto a flatter landing, the impact of my landing is going to be dissipated over a bigger area, and rather than landing heavy and hard and getting bucked off the bike, I can still deal with the input. Ideally we want to go a little bit faster and clear the gap, obviously, but as you're starting out, and depending on conditions and your ability to get to that jump with more speed, it's better to be able to deal with different landing scenarios than just rely on getting it perfect every time. So when you're building up your confidence in terms of jumping and getting used to the airtime, which may be a new thing entirely for you, or maybe something you haven't visited since you were a nipper, jumping over one of your siblings with a few bricks and a plank, then this can actually start to become more and more intimidating as you get older and as more time passes. The penalty for failure, the imagined penalty for failure, is very high. But you can get away with small mistakes. You get away with small mistakes every time you ride in corners, etc. So don't presume that if you get a few little bits wrong, it's going to end in disaster. Key in terms of one of the key points in terms of the psychology is commitment. Now, misplaced confidence can get you into trouble, but a lack of commitment can really land you in a bit of bother. When we get to the stage of flight and fight, the first reaction will be to grab the brakes. If you slow down and decelerate into the entry point, you really are going to cause more issues than just letting it go. And if you grab the brakes the moment of landing, you can have to deal with that braking force the moment you've landed. That can also throw things into disarray. Worse still is if your fingers stray onto the brakes while you're airborne. You will stop moving, and when they land, they're less likely to roll smoothly out of the jump, but also they're severely weakened and more likely to buckle under you. So stay away from the levers. Beyond the entry point, which is way back up there, you should be accelerating through the section. Once you've successfully landed, you can start to apply the brakes should you need to, in preparation for the next section. So we can see the importance of the three stages in terms of takeoff, airtime and landing. Again, a jump can be split down into an entry point, a section and an exit. And thinking about it in those terms is really going to help you break down the process of doing the jump. Yes, there's going to be a point at which you need to commit, but you need to be in the right place when you do commit. Just doing it because your mates have cajoled you into doing it, or because you think you should do it, isn't the right place to be. Nice and relaxed, nice and fluid, think through it in advance. Read many times is spot your landing. I kind of think that actually, yes, you need to know where your landing is, but if you encourage people to stare at a point in the trail ahead of them, they're quickly going to get to that point, suffer from some ground rush, and if you're airborne, it's easy to start to over-rotate. So look through your landing point. Know where it is, spot it as you approach, but look through to the next section. Don't get hung up, as with any trail feature, on your vision being caught up by your body yourself. So to sum up, when it comes to jumping, don't dive in at the deep end, as it were. Start small, build your way up, but be the person in control. Don't be at the mercy of the terrain itself or the lip of the shape and size of the jump. You want to put yourself in a proactive, controlling position rather than the reactive, freak-out position. Don't get dead sailor in the air, keep nice and fluid, think ahead of the bike. And most of all, don't panic, Mr. Mannering, it'll all be alright.